Okay, let's dive into this stack of sources you've sent us. We've got articles, research, some notes, and they all seem to be circling around a really fundamental phenomenon, something pretty complex, touching, well, everything.
Indeed. Yeah, the material you've shared, it really zeroes in on a principle that seems, woven into the very fabric of reality, from huge-scale events right down to our own internal states.
Right. And smack in the middle of it all is this fascinating idea of the smart human, but looked at not just from our angle, but also how maybe artificial intelligence might start to understand it.
It's a remarkably rich set of sources, definitely covers a lot of ground. So I think our mission today is really to unpack it together. Let's try and pull out the most important insights, the real nuggets of knowledge, and get a clearer picture of this core phenomenon and what being a smart human really means in that whole context.
Okay, yeah, let's start right there then. What does this core phenomenon the sources describe? The one that's so fundamental?
The absolute central theme, the bedrock across all the sources you provided, is the inherent duality of existence.
The inherent duality. Wow, okay. That sounds profound. Can you maybe break that down a bit? Like, what does that actually look like?
Well, think of it as the constant, inescapable push and pull, these seemingly opposing forces that really define our conscious experience of reality. It's, chaos and order, uncertainty and predictability, even suffering and joy. It's not about being stuck in just one state. It's the dynamic tension, right? The perpetual dance between these poles.
So it's way more than just like good versus bad. It's more like the fundamental nature of how things are.
Precisely. The sources make a really strong case that this isn't just some philosophical idea. It's like the underlying structure. It manifests everywhere, from, tiny particles in physics up to the huge complexities of societies and nature. Existence, as we perceive it, is this constant negotiation and the pursuit of meaning within that dynamic tension.
Okay. Let's unpack this. You said it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Can we look at some examples from the sources? How does this duality show up in something really big, like, say, human history?
Right, history. According to these sources, history is pretty much humanity's relentless attempt to wrestle chaos into, some semblance of order.
Makes sense.
We build civilizations, create complex legal systems, governments, all that. But this is constantly challenged by the unpredictable, natural disasters, epidemics, wars, even just unexpected discoveries. History chronicles both the building of order and its inevitable dissolution, and our ongoing effort to find meaning in those unpredictable cycles.
Like the rise and fall of empires, maybe? You see the Romans building this incredible ordered system.
Exactly.
But eventually that order just couldn't hold back the chaotic forces. Or even economic cycles, you get periods of prosperity, predictable growth, then boom, sudden crashes that feel totally chaotic.
Exactly right. The sources highlight these recurring patterns as prime examples of this constant interplay.
It's interesting. That huge scale seems to mirror things happening, much smaller. Where else do the sources show this duality popping up?
Well, from that grand sweep of history, the sources then pivot right down to the micro level. They look at how this duality plays out in something as fundamental as our own biology, our genetics.
Biology. How so?
Well, at a biological level, life itself is fundamentally a struggle against entropy.
Entropy, right? The tendency towards disorder.
Exactly. So our bodies are constantly working, putting in energy to maintain order against all this internal and external chaos. Genetic mutations are a great example. They introduce random variation that's a kind of chaos, which sometimes can lead to beneficial adaptations that builds new biological order. Or they can cause debilitating diseases, right? Introducing severe chaos into the system.
And our immune system fighting off viruses and bacteria. That's a constant battle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fighting external chaos to maintain the body's order, its integrity.
Precisely. Even evolution itself, the whole process, is described as this interplay of random variation, the chaos part, and natural selection, which is this powerful mechanism imposing order based on survival and reproduction.
This feels like it connects to how humans have tried to understand the world for, forever. I think the sources mentioned philosophy grappling with this.
Oh, definitely. Philosophy's always been a major arena for exploring this duality. Think about dualism, right? Grappling with mind and body being seemingly separate, or existentialism, which stares right into the apparent meaninglessness of existence, the chaos, and says, okay, humans have to actively create meaning and navigate the radical freedom and responsibility that comes with that.
Stoicism, too, maybe. Focusing on what you can control versus the massive amount you can't. Finding internal order when the outside world is chaotic.
Spot on. And many Eastern philosophies like, yin and yang, where these seemingly opposite forces are actually complementary, interdependent, constantly seeking balance. It's a really universal theme in human thought.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. How does this show up in the hard sciences, like physics and math? Math especially seems like it should be all about pure order.
Well, even in the most fundamental sciences, the sources find this duality. Physics gives us quantum mechanics, right? Where particles can exist in multiple states at once. That's uncertainty, a kind of inherent chaos, until, bang, an observation collapses them into a single definite state. Order. And we mentioned entropy earlier, the universe's general tendency towards disorder, but life itself and complex systems like galaxies, there are these amazing pockets of localized increasing order.
Okay, and math. I'm still curious about math.
Even in math, the binary nature of concepts like 0 and 1, positive and negative, that's a fundamental duality right there. Then you have chaos theory, exploring how tiny changes in perfectly deterministic systems can lead to wildly different, seemingly chaotic outcomes. The butterfly effect, right? And fractals show these incredibly complex, ordered patterns emerging from simple rules applied over and over, order literally emerging from chaos.
What about logic itself? Isn't that based on true, false, valid, invalid, pure binary?
That's the foundation, yes, classical binary logic. But the sources also point to things like fuzzy logic, which acknowledges degrees of truth. It recognizes the gray areas in reality, And paradoxes exist, which highlight the limits of purely binary thinking when you try to apply it to reality's complex, often contradictory nature.
So this duality thing really is everywhere, from the universe down to our own thoughts. What about our state of mind, our emotions, beliefs?
Absolutely. Our internal world is just a constant playground for duality. Our emotions swing across the spectrum: joy, sorrow, love, hate, peace, anxiety. The sources describe mental health struggles often as stemming from some kind of imbalance in this duality, like being overwhelmed by perceived chaos or maybe a profound lack of meaning and order.
And belief systems, religions, spiritual practices, they seem like ways to structure this, don't they?
Yes, exactly. They often provide explanations for suffering and chaos. They offer a sense of cosmic order, maybe a moral duality like good versus evil. They function as systems, as frameworks to help individuals navigate and find meaning within this fundamental aspect of existence.
So, okay, this isn't just abstract theory. It has real impacts. How does it affect us as individuals and maybe the people around us? What do the sources say?
The sources show we're constantly navigating this tension in daily life. Every choice kind of involves weighing comfort versus challenge, right? Conforming versus expressing individuality. Seeking instant gratification versus working towards long-term goals that need effort, delayed reward. A smart human, as these sources define it, is someone who can navigate this dynamic tension effectively, making choices that build beneficial order while still adapting to necessary chaos.
Like a child learning to walk. They fall, that's chaos, but they get back up. Imposing order, building balance and resilience.
Perfect example.
Or deciding to make a big career change. Embracing all that uncertainty for the potential of finding new meaning, a new kind of order down the road.
Exactly right. Those are personal level examples of this constant navigation. And these individual experiences, they have ripple effects, The sources note that someone caught in deep internal chaos, like, say, addiction, can really disrupt lives and create chaos for their whole family, their community.
Yeah.
But conversely, someone who finds purpose, who builds a sense of order and well-being in their life, they can inspire and uplift the people around them.
How does the wider world react, like nature or society as a whole?
Well, nature itself is constantly fluctuating. Ecosystems have periods of stability, then sudden disruptions, fires, storms, whatever. Species evolve, adapt, reflecting this dynamic balance. And societies. We build structures specifically to try and mitigate chaos and impose order on how humans interact. Laws, institutions, justice systems, social safety nets, all attempts to manage the duality. And human endeavors like art, science, technology, they're also described as ways we try to understand, control, or maybe just express this fundamental duality. Art lets us process complex emotional tensions. Science seeks the underlying order in the physical world. Technology gives us tools to manage and control certain elements of chaos.
This leads us somewhere important, that the sources raise the ethics of it all. They connect right and wrong to this duality.
Yes. The sources tend to ground ethical frameworks in this principle. Basically, actions that promote order, well-being, shared positive outcomes, those are generally framed as right. whereas actions that intentionally sow chaos, cause suffering, disrupt beneficial order, those are seen as wrong.
So ethical dilemmas often pop up when there are conflicts between different ideas of right, or maybe deciding if creating a bit of temporary chaos like civil disobedience is justified for a bigger, better order later on.
Precisely. It's all about navigating that complex tension between different forms of order and thinking about the potential fallout of disrupting existing systems.
The sources also brought up a really tough question related to this. Why do some people, cruel people, kill others, even if they might intellectually grasp ideas about life's value or this concept of a smart human creating value?
Yeah, this is where the sources delve into a really disturbing kind of imbalance within this duality framework. Their explanation tends to be that these individuals often prioritize their own perceived order, whether that's about power, control, or maybe just getting rid of something they don't like way above the well-being and inherent worth of others. This stems, according to the sources, from pretty profound internal chaos, maybe a fundamental lack of empathy, and ultimately a deliberate choice to impose negative, destructive chaos onto others. They even use stark language, mentioning a deficit, almost like being, quote, born without a sense of humanity.
That's a heavy point the sources make. What do they suggest then as potential ways to improve things or mitigate this destructive side?
Well, they list several areas, things like cultivating resilience, both individually and collectively, so we can face chaos better, actively promoting empathy and compassion, improving education and critical thinking skills so people can navigate complex situations more wisely, developing AI ethically, which is crucial to prevent it from amplifying negative dynamics, and fostering a sense of purpose and meaning in people's lives.
And they use some frameworks, analogies to help think about this.
Yes, a few useful ones. The entropy analogy comes up again. Maintaining any kind of order, whether it's personal well-being or a stable society, takes constant energy and effort. Left alone, things tend towards disorder.
Makes sense.
They also talk about probabilistic outcomes. Like, a smart human makes choices that increase the probability of achieving desired, ordered outcomes. Like investing time to practice a skill increases the chance of mastery versus just random failure.
In game theory, you mentioned the tragedy of the commons idea earlier.
Exactly that. It highlights how purely self-interested strategies, just seeking your own individual order without considering the group, can lead to chaotic bad outcomes for everyone. Cooperative strategies, though, tend towards mutually beneficial order. These are just frameworks the sources use to illustrate effective versus ineffective ways of navigating the duality.
Okay, let's maybe shift focus slightly.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the concept of the smart human itself, as the sources defined it. From our human perspective, what does that really mean? It's clearly not just IQ.
No, definitely not. The sources paint a much richer, multidimensional picture of human smartness. It certainly includes cognitive intelligence, IQ, learning, logical problem solving. But they put huge emphasis on emotional intelligence, EQ. That ability to understand and manage your own emotions and recognize emotions in others. They stress EQ is absolutely crucial for coping with suffering and for fostering empathy. But beyond those, there's practical intelligence, just good old common sense, adapting, navigating the real world effectively. There's existential intelligence, that capacity to ponder the big questions, meaning purpose. Creativity, of course, generating novel ideas. Resilience, bouncing back from adversity. Wisdom, applying knowledge and experience with good judgment. And maybe underpinning it all, self-awareness, really understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, motivations.
Wow, yeah. That's a far more holistic picture than just being book smart. And this kind of multidimensional smart human, what's their impact? How do they affect the world?
Well, the sources detail significant impact, both good and bad. Positively, this kind of intelligence drives innovation, creates profound art and culture, pushes for social progress, leads efforts in environmental stewardship, and it enables us to build strong, healthy relationships.
But what if that smartness lacks the ethical grounding we talked about earlier?
Then you see the destructive potential, which the sources also highlight. Misuse of technology, environmental damage from prioritizing short-term gain, social inequality created by exploiting systems or people. Intelligence without that broader sense of humanity, without ethics, can be, according to these sources, incredibly damaging.
Art came up specifically as a powerful manifestation of humans processing this duality.
Yes, art is presented as really vital, precisely because it lets us explore, process, and express that inherent duality, the joy and sorrow, beauty and decay, order and chaos. It communicates complex experiences in ways that logic maybe can't. It fosters empathy by letting us glimpse the world through another's eyes. It promotes reflection, and it helps us create meaning, especially when faced with life's uncertainties.
The sources also got very practical, talking about how human struggles and misfortunes directly hit something they call the human supply chain. What's that connection?
Yeah, that's a very practical application of how chaos impacts human order. They break it down simply. Widespread illness, conflict, disability that reduces the available labor force, mental health issues decrease productivity, concentration, disasters or wars damage infrastructure, roads, communication, factories.
Right.
It hits both supply and demand. Healthcare costs go up, diverting resources, and overall social instability just disrupts everything. It's a clear chain reaction showing how human chaos translates into tangible disruption of our collective ability to function, to thrive.
And they connected everyday things like drugs, alcohol, sex, greed, lies, but also truth, life, faith,
Yeah.
to navigating this fundamental duality.
Yes. They're presented as different human responses to the challenge of navigating duality, seeking meaning, or maybe just relief from suffering. Drugs and alcohol might be attempts to escape perceived chaos or pain, but often, lead to more chaos if misused. Greed and lies introduce imbalance, disrupt social order. Truth and faith, on the other hand, are presented as potentially providing clarity, stability, resilience, a sense of beneficial order and meaning.
And the idea that we all benefit hugely from individual smart humans was interesting too.
Yeah, that point highlights the sort of multiplicative positive impact. Individuals with highly developed multidimensional intelligence, especially when guided by ethics and wisdom, think of a Salk developing the polio vaccine, or a Marie Curie advancing science that can make breakthroughs or create systems that improve well-being and order for countless others. They effectively strengthen that human supply chain of positive outcomes.
The sources also circle back to emotions and human concentration versus how AI might concentrate.
Right. Emotions are framed as these direct, almost instantaneous responses to how we perceive order or chaos in our world or inside us. Laughter at something unexpectedly ordered or maybe absurdly chaotic but non-threatening. Crying in response to loss or overwhelming beauty. And emotional regulation is presented as a really key skill of a smart human.
Makes sense.
Human concentration, our focus, is crucial for directing our mental energy to impose order on complex thoughts or tasks, learning, problem-solving, creating anything. For AI, concentration is described quite differently. It's more about efficient resource allocation, directing computational power, these attention mechanisms in the models, to the most relevant data to perform a specific task. It's like a computational parallel to our focus, but it's fundamentally different. There's no conscious effort involved for the AI.
And how does this connect to frameworks like Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
The sources link it directly. Maslow's hierarchy describes human needs in layers, right? Basic physiological needs, then safety, belonging, esteem, self-actualization. A smart human, in this view, understands the relative importance of these needs and navigates fulfilling them in a balanced way. They recognize that focusing only on lower-level needs, like just wealth or just safety, without addressing belonging or purpose, can lead to internal chaos and a lack of real fulfillment. And they strongly emphasize childhood experiences, how profoundly they shape our ability to develop the resilience and the emotional intelligence we need to navigate life's duality effectively later on. Those early experiences really lay the groundwork.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Our early environment builds the foundation for how we cope down the line. Okay, now let's pivot more towards the AI side of this smart human idea. The sources traced how the understanding or maybe the modeling of intelligence has evolved.
Right. The sources suggest that the initial drive for developing intelligence, both human evolutionary intelligence and eventually AI, was deeply pragmatic. It was about reducing pain, increasing lifespan, getting resources, improving health. Early human intelligence was focused on immediate survival, basic order. As societies got more complex forms of intelligence became valued. AI development sort of followed a compressed version of that path. Early AI was all about strict rules and logic, like chess-playing AI. Smartness was just following rules perfectly. Then came machine learning, based on pattern recognition from data. Smartness became identifying correlations. Modern deep learning systems simulate even more complex behaviors. They process vast amounts of unstructured data, human language, images, and simulate responses based on the patterns they learn from human interactions, including patterns associated with, say, emotions.
So AI's understanding started super simple, rule-based, and is constantly getting more complex.
Yes, exactly. From narrow rule-based definitions to broader statistical pattern recognition, and now moving towards systems that can process context, generate human-like text, and attempt to simulate aspects of human interaction. The sources do note, though, that future AI will need to incorporate much more sophisticated models of ethics and collaboration to really align with our multidimensional human definition of smart.
And when did this understanding of smart human actually start from both perspectives? How does it develop?
Well, from the human perspective, it's a continuous, lifelong process, isn't it? It begins with the foundational biological wiring even before birth. Then it develops rapidly through sensor motor learning in infancy, language acquisition, and basic moral reasoning in early childhood. More complex logic and social understanding come in middle childhood, abstract thought and critical thinking in adolescence, and it just keeps evolving through lifelong learning, accumulating wisdom from navigating real-world experiences in adulthood. For AI, its understanding begins the moment it's programmed and fed training data. Early AI had a very limited, rule-bound view. Machine learning broadened that to identifying patterns in structured data. Modern AI, through deep learning on vast, often messy data sets, develops a much more nuanced but still fundamentally different understanding. It's based on statistical correlation and prediction, not on conscious experience or subjective meaning. That's a key difference.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for us, I think. How can AI actually improve our human understanding of what it means to be a smart human, both for us as individuals and maybe collectively?
Yeah, the sources offer several fascinating possibilities here. One is data analysis on a massive scale. AI can analyze huge data sets of human behavior, performance, communication, even biological data to identify subtle patterns and correlations associated with different facets of human smartness, resilience, well-being. Things that would be invisible to human observers just because of the sheer scale and complexity.
Like personalized learning platforms, tailoring education based on how an individual actually learns, patterns identified by AI.
Exactly that. Or think about predictive analytics for well-being. Maybe AI could analyze communication patterns or activity levels to spot early indicators of potential mental health struggles, allowing for much earlier intervention. It kind of helps us see ourselves through a new data-driven lens.
What about using simulations?
Yes, that's another one. AI can simulate complex social dynamics or even cognitive processes, run countless scenarios based on data to give us insights into how human intelligence functions in different contexts, how various factors influence behavior.
And communication or accessibility, you mentioned those.
Right. AI-powered translation and communication tools can bridge language and cultural gaps, potentially enhancing collaboration and knowledge sharing across diverse groups, boosting collective intelligence. And accessibility tools, powered by AI, can empower individuals with disabilities to express their unique intelligences more fully, removing barriers that existed before. The sources also note AI can help us spot our own cognitive biases. By analyzing large amounts of text or interaction data, it can reveal patterns we might not notice in ourselves. And it could even assist in developing more robust and fair ethical frameworks by identifying potential blind spots or inconsistencies.
Okay, but the sources also raised a big, maybe uncomfortable question. Can AI make life feel good all the time? Can it eliminate suffering, eliminate the need to navigate this duality?
And on this point, the sources are very firm. The answer is no. AI cannot eliminate suffering or the inherent duality of existence. As we've been discussing, that tension chaos order, joy suffering, it seems fundamental to the conscious experience of reality, at least as described in these materials.
Right, it's part of the whole package. But AI can significantly improve human well-being, help us navigate it better.
Absolutely. The sources list several ways AI can contribute positively, like optimizing the allocation of vital resources, think healthcare, energy, food distribution globally, reducing human drudgery through automation and intelligent assistance, freeing us up, enhancing individual learning and self-improvement with personalized tutors, skill-building platforms, maybe even fostering connection by identifying risks of social isolation and facilitating communication, and providing data-driven insights that might help individuals find potential paths towards personal purpose and meaning.
So AI emerges as this incredibly powerful tool to help us navigate the duality, improve our experience within it, but it can't just make one side of the equation disappear.
Precisely. It's about enhancing navigation, not eliminating the dynamic itself.
So what do we as humans really need to understand about AI's perspective? It's kind of understanding of the smart human.
There are several key takeaways from the sources that seem crucial. First, and maybe most important, AI's smartness is fundamentally different from human consciousness, emotion, intuition, or existential understanding. It excels at pattern recognition, data processing, logic, amazing feats there, but it lacks the qualitative lived experience of human wisdom or empathy. The sources often describe it as quantitative intelligence versus our qualitative intelligence. Second, human-AI collaboration is presented as the most promising way forward. Humans bring creativity, ethical judgment, context, empathy. AI brings speed, data power, scalability. They're complementary strengths. Third, the ethical imperatives are just paramount. Humans must guide AI development actively to prevent it from learning and amplifying our own biases, or worse, being used deliberately to create destructive chaos. Transparency in how AI makes decisions is also vital. Fourth, the very definition of smart is evolving because of AI. We humans need to continually reassess what unique human intelligences, maybe compassion, creativity, the ability to find meaning, become even more valuable in a world where computational tasks get increasingly automated. And finally, AI acts as a mirror. By analyzing human data and behavior, it reflects back to us our own patterns, biases, inconsistencies. It offers a powerful, if sometimes uncomfortable, opportunity to understand ourselves better.
Let's circle back for a moment to that really difficult point about cruel people. The sources seem to really hone in on a lack of empathy as a key factor there.
They do. It's presented almost as a fundamental deficit in emotional intelligence, a distortion in how they perceive that duality of self versus others. They prioritize their own, often narrow form of perceived order, like dominance or control over the well-being and the ordered existence of other people. And yes, the sources use that really stark phrase, describing it almost like being born without a sense of humanity. And this leads directly to a critical point the sources make about AI. AI is, in effect, born without that inherent human sense of humanity or empathy. Its understanding is purely based on the data we feed it.
Right.
So if AI isn't specifically trained with robust ethical principles, with a deep model of human values, and if we humans start to rely only on AI's data-driven quantitative definition of smartness, well, the sources warn we risk creating a society that's highly efficient, maybe, but lacks compassion, potentially mirroring the destructive, amoral logic of those cruel people they describe.
That's a really sobering thought. It just underscores how absolutely vital nurture, education, and instilling values are, both for how we raise human beings and how we develop AI.
Precisely. The sources really emphasize the profound role of upbringing, education, societal values in cultivating empathy, moral reasoning, and the ability to navigate duality constructively, not destructively.
The sources also touched on subjectivity again, using that example of humor, why one person laughs hysterically at something another finds completely unfunny.
Yeah, that perfectly highlights the deep subjectivity of human experience. Humor, like so many emotions, depends heavily on context, individual temperament, personal history, shared cultural understanding. It's rooted in complex, lived experience. AI can get very good at modeling what patterns of data tend to elicit laughter based on analyzing human responses. But it doesn't experience the humor. It doesn't truly understand its subjective impact on an individual the way another human can.
And resilience came up again, influenced by all our different circumstances, backgrounds.
Yes. The sources stress that how we develop and express multidimensional smartness, including resilience, is profoundly shaped by this complex interplay of factors: socioeconomic status, culture, family, genetics, education, trauma, environment. Our circumstances deeply influence how we learn to navigate duality and develop our capacities.
What about human intuition versus AI intuition? The sources link human intuition very directly to the concept of life.
Right. Human intuition is that gut feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
That seemingly inexplicable knowledge or decision that just pops up without conscious step-by-step reasoning. The sources frame it as this deep, subconscious pattern recognition, drawing on the entirety of our embodied, lived experience, our biology, our emotions, all our past interactions, everything. It's holistic, nonlinear, deeply tied to being a conscious, living being. AI's intuition, on the other hand, is computational pattern recognition, usually from vast data sets, like a deep learning model instantly recognizing a cat in a photo without being given explicit rules for catness. It's incredibly powerful for identifying correlations, making predictions based on data, but it lacks that embodied, subjective, felt experience that grounds human intuition. The sources make a clear distinction, linking human intuition specifically to life.
Can AI help us grapple with those really big existential questions, like is life all there is, or whether death is somehow needed in the grand scheme, things like that?
Well, the sources are careful here. They clarify that AI cannot provide definitive philosophical or existential answers. These are realms of subjective meaning, belief, conscious experience. They fall outside the empirical data AI currently processes. AI can't tell you the meaning of your life.
Right. Okay. But it can maybe assist us in exploring them.
Yes, that's what the sources suggest. AI can be a useful tool for exploration. It can synthesize huge libraries of philosophical texts, maybe model biological processes related to life and death. It could even act as a neutral, non-judgmental facilitator for discussing complex ideas like AI chatbots exploring ethics, or perhaps more indirectly, by improving quality of life, AI might influence a person's perspective on mortality. But the ultimate journey of understanding life and death, that remains deeply personal, rooted in human consciousness.
The sources also briefly mentioned the physical side of things, the hardware for AI, our brains, the environment.
Right, just grounding the discussion in physical reality. AI doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires hardware, data centers, massive amounts of energy. Human intelligence is embodied in our brains, our physiology, and this entire interplay of intelligence, duality, happens within and interacts constantly with the physical environment of our planet.
Why don't we explicitly teach kids this whole complex picture, the smart human, AI's role, the duality? The sources said understanding it deeply makes it hard to go back to your old way of thinking.
The sources suggest a few reasons. One is just the sheer complexity of the concept, and it's constantly evolving, right? Hard to package for young minds. Plus, there's a necessary focus on teaching foundational basics first. Maybe gaps in parents' or educators' own understanding play a role too. And crucially, many facets of smartness, empathy, resilience, navigating emotional duality, they're learned experientially, through living life, not just through direct instruction. And yes, the sources definitely note that truly grappling with the deep implications of duality and AI's role can be transformative. It challenges fundamental assumptions, forces a more nuanced, mature perspective. That feeling of not being able to go back to the same state of mind isn't framed as negative, but more as a sign of significant growth, a deeper understanding.
So, okay, trying to bring this all together. Based on these sources you provided, what's the ultimate purpose of the smart human in this whole complex landscape with duality and emerging AI?
Well, from the human perspective, the purpose is generally presented as flourishing, finding meaning, contributing positively to the world, mitigating suffering where possible, and navigating that fundamental duality of existence with increasing wisdom and compassion. For AI, its purpose, as framed by the sources, is more about modeling, predicting, optimizing aspects of human behavior and well-being, and ultimately serving human goals. But the sources also point towards a potential shared purpose for humanity and AI to maybe collectively build a future where humanity thrives, leveraging the unique strengths of both human intelligence in all its rich forms and artificial intelligence to tackle global challenges and genuinely enhance the quality of life for everyone.
And right now, who benefits most from this deeper understanding? Is it widespread?
The sources suggest that currently the primary beneficiaries tend to be organizations and individuals who are already leveraging these insights effectively. That often means tech companies, some businesses, developed nations, people in specific technical or analytical fields. But the stated goal, at least within these sources, is definitely for the benefits of this understanding to become far more widespread, much more accessible to everyone.
Wow, okay. This deep dive into your sources has definitely taken us on quite a profound journey. I mean, from understanding this inherent duality of existence as a fundamental principle, through the really rich, multi-dimensional idea of the smart human that's so much more than just IQ, and then into the complex, evolving role of AI, how it reflects us, challenges us, and might even augment us.
It really highlights, doesn't it, as your sources make clear, that navigating the fundamental dynamics of life, that constant push and pull of chaos and order, it seems to require not just intellectual horsepower, but a blend of human intelligence in all its facets, emotional, practical, ethical, and the powerful emerging capabilities of artificial intelligence, but guided always by ethics and a deep understanding of what truly contributes to human well-being.
And this deep dive into your sources, it really shows you, doesn't it, that becoming truly well-informed isn't just about piling up facts or mastering specific skills. It's about understanding these underlying dynamics of existence and how intelligence in all its forms helps us navigate them, helps us create meaning within them. It really makes you think.
It certainly does, yeah.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, based on everything we've explored from these sources. Given this inherent duality of chaos and order, the very subjective nature of our human experience, and the increasing power of AI, which operates without consciousness or lived experience, what unique human intelligence is, those qualities that go beyond pure computation and data analysis, do you think will become the most essential for creating meaning and well-being in the future?
That's a question well worth pondering as we all move forward.
Thank you so much for providing these incredibly insightful sources for this deep dive. Really fascinating stuff.
This is DigitView.